Hello and welcome to HD Live. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mabel Jong. A nonprofit run by a group of graduate students from Drexel University has partnered with the Philadelphia Department of Health to run a mass vaccination site, a pop-up, at the Pennsylvania's Convention Center. Andrei Doroshin is the founder of Philly Fighting COVID, and he joins us now. Hey, Andrei, thank you so much. Great to see
Hi.
you.
Good morning. How are you?
Really great, and really excited to hear about what you're doing in Philly. By some estimates, it could have taken a year, an entire year, to vaccinate the people there. How is the company you formed with engineers and scientists accelerating that pace?
Right. So basically in healthcare, the business model is, and this really is a business model issue, which is the business model in most healthcare systems, such as pharmacies and hospitals, is larger, more expensive operations or procedures or visits, right? So elective surgeries is really what makes hospitals a lot of money. So they're not designed to handle large volume of small paying patients, right? Like an administrative fee for a vaccine. So we looked at it and said, all right, well, places in Europe where they have socialized medicine, in large cases, are more comfortable with dealing with that high volume. So we looked at Europe, we looked at India, and we started finding that they were more comfortable with dealing with higher volume. Whereas in the United States, we have a very hard time with that. And that was really evident with testing, where we saw the testing infrastructure really fall apart because there was nobody was really doing testing. The hospitals didn't want to do it because there was not enough money in it. The pharmacies could barely do it because they didn't have the physical resources like the space. Pharmacies have a pharmacy, but the pharmacies make more money off of the selling of products and medicines than they do from testing. So it's not in their best interest to actually do testing. They need to do it because they need to look like they are. Whereas when we started doing testing, which is really how we got into it, we found that there was a business model that was available where if we did enough tests and we tailored our product only for testing, we could make it viable. And now the same thing happens with vaccines, where we said, all right, if in America, our healthcare system is not built for doing high volume, let's build one that can. And so we hired engineers that have built factories. We've hired cybersecurity experts who, secured stuff for the military. We've hired engineers who've done all kinds of process engineering, up, down, and sideways, done flow, physics people who've done, flow mathematics, and basically built this model.
And who funds you?
So this was initially funded by yours truly, as well as two of my very close friends.
Okay. So you opened a mass vaccine clinic. You're using the city's convention center. How hard was that to do? You're inoculating between 100 to 450 people each hour, I believe, maybe even up to 4,500 people a day. So how did you get that running? You've got this idea. You approached the city about your idea, and they said, "Go ahead, use the convention center."
No, so actually, I'm going to break down the.
Okay.
So we started actually 6 months ago. My friend Carol and I had the idea that we're going to need infrastructure for vaccines because right now we don't. And to your previous point, it would have taken a whole year to vaccinate the entire city. By my estimates, actually more like 2 or 3 years. And so what we said, all right, let's build a model that's tailored for this, a brand new model that's never been done before. And we had 6 months. So I bankrolled an operation for 6 months that was making no money, absolutely no promises of the future, no promises of doses. And that's kind of what we did. We hired some really, really amazing people. We built this model, and that's kind of what we deployed. When we came to the city, though, we were kind of pestering them saying, come on, we're ready, we're ready, we're ready. And the problem here is that the allocations from the CDC are not great to the city of Philadelphia. You're hearing a lot nationally about spoilage. Philly has no spoilage. There are no vaccines in Philly that are going bad because the Philadelphia Department of Health is doing such an amazing job of making sure they get out.
Okay.
We need more vaccine, actually.
Right.
So
this is a true partnership. The city helps you with the transport and refrigeration logistics.
Yep.
Okay.
And we found the convention center was our idea to do the high throughput models. So that's kind of where we come in.
And you're following the city's vaccination schedule, or can anyone sign up on a portal and get their shot?
We have to be very, very strict in terms of following their schedule. There was recently a piece written about us in the Inquirer about how people are slipping through the cracks and this and that. We have to make sure that we're only vaccinating healthcare workers right now. Then we have to make sure that after that it's essential workers, 1B, then the 1C. Obviously, people will slip through the cracks. It's almost impossible to make sure that every single person is within that category. But we think that we do a pretty good job through our filtering mechanisms.
Okay. And the blueprint, is it easy to replicate across your state and across the country? What are the concrete steps for other cities to take up what you've done and do it in their own cities to accelerate their vaccination programs?
It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult because there's so many moving parts. There's so many little things that are highly sophisticated in terms of timing that you might not see just by observing the operation, including the software, including this. We do urge cities to start mass immunizations, but we also urge cities to reach out to us as we are starting a kind of franchise agreement where we're going to be selling our package, kind of like a McDonald's, where it's going to be very, very strict operational requirements.
Okay.
That's kind of what we're urging.
Give me a ballpark on the type of investment it would take for other cities to do what you've done.
Oh, I don't know. It depends on how many doses you have available, right? That number would change dramatically. I mean, if you want to vaccinate Philly on our level, it would probably cost around $50 million, which in the grand scheme of things is actually not a lot of money considering the economic downstream effects, right? If we get everybody vaccinated, the economy's back up and running. That's trillions of dollars that's being made, as opposed to, 50 million that you spent rather.
50 million over what period? Over the 6 months that you mentioned? Yeah. Okay. Given what you're seeing on the ground in Philadelphia, do you think Americans should be preparing for a vaccine shortage?
I mean, we're already in a vaccine shortage. Not necessarily from the suppliers, but more so from the officials that have made this something. The actual distribution and allocation of the vaccine is really the problem, right? You're getting all these stories about, I'm sure you're tracking them, about, for example, Pennsylvania, half their doses going spoiled, this, that, and that's because it's not. Let me step back. I'm sorry. I know this is annoying.
Sure. No problem.
In testing, there was a lot of stories coming out about how there's shortages of swabs. That was not true. In fact, I talked to a lot of reporters trying to discourage them from writing pieces like that. That's not true at all. There was actually a shortage of people giving out testing. That's really where the shortage was. It was just too difficult of a business to frankly do. It was too difficult of a service. I mean, we force-fed it just because we thought it was the right ethical thing to do, but it was not the suppliers. It was the actual administration of the swabs. The same things with the vaccine. In a lot of cases, they don't even have the ability to give out vaccine. And that goes back to the problem with hospitals, right? Like, you've seen pictures of our facility. It's massive. It's 100,000 square feet in Center City. And we're only operating at 30% capacity. In order to really distribute a lot of vaccine, you need a lot of physical space because you need to have that 15-minute waiting period after the vaccine was administered. And then you also need 6 feet of social distancing between everybody at all times. So you can't do it in a CVS, and you definitely can't do it in a hospital. I know at Penn they're doing it in their auditorium, but they're going pretty slow.
Okay. We are hearing stories about people not showing up when the vaccines are ready to be given, so they go to waste. So that's pretty typical then.
No, that's actually not true.
Okay.
That's completely untrue. If we have, at the end of the day, at Philly Fighting COVID, if we have vaccine that's left over, we have waitlist people, other healthcare workers, and we give them a call. Okay. We make sure that nobody is left behind when it comes to vaccine. Really, the vaccine wastage comes from there being less Philly Fighting COVIDs.
Okay. So where else are you opening up vaccination sites?
We are looking currently at Los Angeles, at DC, at Baltimore, and as well as Boston.
Okay. And is there anything that I haven't asked that you believe people should know?
Hmm. I love that question.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Stop using best practices. I think the old best practices in healthcare in terms of intramuscular injections were written for a hospital visit that would take 30 minutes that you needed to do a bill for as a provider visit. Um, those best practices can, most of them go out the window, which is what we've looked at. For example, I'll give an example, right? Because it's a broad thing to say. I want to give an example. Having the same nurse that fills the syringes doing the actual injection is a best practice, right? And that's actually a bad one. And the reason it's a bad one is, and a lot of people say, oh, well, it's making sure. No, what you want, if you're doing a lot of people, is you want a different nurse doing the actual drawing of the syringe than doing the injection, because then you could have another nurse on the side doing basically quality control, which is what we have. So we have 3 people at all times looking at every syringe, making sure it's filled correctly. If
Okay.
you have one person doing the drawing up and the injection, it's only 1 point of quality control. We have 3. And
Okay.
that's just a basic point of like this idea that people in healthcare have these impenetrable thoughts is false. There are a lot of things that can change.
Okay. So when you're talking about that many people for one syringe, you are talking about hiring a lot of medical personnel that's not already in the field.
Not necessarily. You have to understand when you increase the amount of people, right? It's like, let's say you take a filling nurse, an injecting nurse, as well as a supervising nurse, and you have them all there. And obviously, they're not nurses. Some are nurse practitioners, some are nursing students, like the people doing the drawing. A lot of times, they're nursing students. But I'm just using nurse as a generalization. The speed of the operation increases so much so that it becomes better. It goes back to economies of scale, right? And so that's why you need engineers, because healthcare people oftentimes don't think that way. They don't think in systems. Engineers think in systems by nature. So they're not thinking, oh, well, that's 2 extra people I have to hire. They're thinking, wait a sec, that's 74% more efficiency in the system.
Right. Okay. Wow, Andre, it is just amazing to be able to learn more about your operation, and we hope to see more of your sites across the country. Thank
Yeah,
you
you
so much
will.
for your time today. Way to go. We've just been speaking with Andrei Doroshin, who is CEO of Philly Fighting COVID. Thanks for watching HD Live. I'm Mabel Jong.